Why do you suffer when you've been faithful, while those living in sin seem to enjoy peace? Why is your cross heavier than those who've turned away from God? Could your pain be meaningless? Saint Teresa of Avila discovered 7 hidden reasons that will forever change how you understand your suffering. How many nights have you cried out to God, asking why He allows you to suffer? You've prayed the rosary daily, kept the commandments, remained faithful in your marriage, raised your children in the faith, and yet illness knocked at your door. Widowhood came when you least expected it. Loneliness embraces you each night while you watch others who live far from God, enjoying health, prosperity, and united families. Doesn't God see your faithfulness? Is your sacrifice worth nothing? The answer exists, and it's found in the mystical revelations of Saint Teresa of Avila. She lived this exact pain. She spent years paralyzed, abandoned by doctors, questioning God in the darkest agony. But it was precisely in that suffering where the Lord revealed to her 7 reasons why He permits the cross specifically to good people. 7 reasons the Church rarely explains. 7 reasons that will transform your pain into dignity and your cross into a crown. Today, you'll discover each of these 7 reasons exactly as Saint Teresa received them from God. But stay until the end, because the 7th reason, the most mysterious and consoling, is what Teresa confessed forever transformed her way of embracing suffering. And you'll only fully understand it if you listen to the first 6. What you're about to discover will change your life. There's a question that torments the heart of every faithful woman when suffering comes knocking. Why me? You've kept every commandment. You've attended Mass every Sunday. You've prayed for your children, your spouse, your parents. You've helped those in need. You've forgiven those who hurt you. You've remained silent when you wanted to scream. You've been good. You've been faithful. And still, God allowed illness to invade your body. He allowed death to take the love of your life. He allowed your children to drift from the faith despite your prayers. He allowed loneliness to become your only companion. Meanwhile, you look around and see others who never step inside a church living in apparent happiness. Neighbors who gossip, who lie, who live without God, enjoying perfect health, stable marriages, successful children. And you, who've given everything for love of God, carry a cross that bends your back and brings tears every night. It's natural to question whether God is just, whether your faithfulness matters, whether it wouldn't be better to live like everyone else, without sacrifices, without surrender, without pain. It's natural to doubt when suffering becomes unbearable and answers don't come. Saint Teresa of Avila felt exactly that. And in the midst of her deepest agony, God revealed the first truths that will change how you understand your pain. Your suffering isn't coincidence. It's not bad luck. It's not divine abandonment. It's design. It's choice. It's purpose. God permits your cross because He has a specific plan for your soul, a plan that can only be fulfilled through pain. And the first reason for that plan is this: God permits your suffering to purify your soul from attachment to earthly things. Listen carefully to what Saint Teresa taught in her autobiography. She explained that the human soul, however devout, clings to the things of this world. Not out of wickedness, but by nature. We cling to our body's health. We cling to the company of our loved ones. We cling to financial security. We cling to what others think of us. We cling to our plans, our dreams, our expectations of how life should be. And God, in His infinite wisdom, knows that while our hearts are tied to earthly things, they cannot rise completely toward the eternal. He knows that as long as we place our happiness in things that can be lost, we'll live in constant anxiety. That's why He allows those things to break. Not to destroy us, but to free us. Not to punish us, but to purify us. Like the goldsmith who places gold in fire, not to ruin it, but to separate the dross and reveal the pure metal within. Teresa lived this firsthand. For 3 years she was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to care for herself, abandoned by doctors who declared her case hopeless. And in that paralysis, she lost everything she had valued: her independence, her dignity, her ability to serve in the convent. She even lost the ability to pray as before. She felt useless. She felt abandoned. She felt punished. But it was precisely there, at the bottom of that abyss, where she understood the truth. God wasn't punishing her. He was stripping away everything superficial so her soul could cling only to Him. He was breaking the invisible chains that bound her to her own will, her own control, her own pride. He was burning away the dross to reveal the pure gold of her faith. And when Teresa finally understood this, when she stopped resisting the pain and began accepting it as God's instrument of purification, something extraordinary happened. The suffering didn't disappear, but its meaning changed completely. It was no longer a curse. It was a blessing. It was no longer punishment. It was a gift. It was no longer evidence of God's abandonment. It was evidence of His deepest love. Because God only purifies what He loves, only refines the gold He considers valuable, only prunes the tree He wants to see flourish. And if God has allowed suffering to touch your life, it's because He considers you worthy of being purified. It's because He sees in you a soul capable of reaching spiritual heights that can only be conquered through the fire of pain. But this is just the first reason. Saint Teresa discovered there's a second reason even more consoling, a reason that has to do with something happening in heaven every time you suffer on earth. And that second reason is connected to a truth few priests explain, but that will forever change how you see your cross. Imagine for a moment you have 2 daughters. To one you give simple responsibilities: make her bed, organize her toys, help set the table. But to the other, the one you see with greater maturity and strength, you entrust more difficult tasks: caring for her younger sister, helping you with important decisions, supporting the family in times of crisis. Which one do you love more? Neither. You love them equally, but you trust one more because you know she can bear greater weight. This is how God works with you. Saint Teresa of Avila discovered the second reason why God permits suffering specifically to good people. And it's a truth that completely transforms how we understand our cross. God permits your suffering to increase your eternal reward, to elevate you to a level of heavenly glory that can only be reached through pain accepted with love. Listen carefully to what Teresa wrote in the interior castle. She explained that the human soul is like a diamond castle with many rooms. Each room represents a degree of intimacy with God. Some souls never move beyond the first rooms. They live a superficial faith, comfortable, without deep commitment. They pray when it suits them. They do the minimum. They never face true trials because they never dare enter the deeper mansions where God dwells in His closest presence. But there are other souls, chosen souls, whom God invites to penetrate the most intimate rooms of the castle. And the path to those interior mansions is paved with suffering. Not because God is cruel, but because only pain has the power to strip away everything superficial and prepare us for such a deep union with Him that our human being, in its current state, couldn't bear it without being transformed first. Teresa compared it to the process of gold refined in fire. When gold is extracted from the mine, it comes mixed with dirt, stones, and impure metals. To purify it, the goldsmith subjects it to extremely high temperatures. The fire doesn't destroy the gold. On the contrary, it reveals it. It separates the dross, eliminates the impurities, and leaves only the precious metal brilliant, ready to be turned into a jewel worthy of a king. You are that gold. Your soul is the precious metal God wants to purify. And And suffering is the fire that separates from you everything that isn't from God. Pride, attachment, fear, the need for control, dependence on earthly things. But here comes the part few understand. The more intense the fire, the purer the gold. The greater your suffering accepted with faith, the greater your purification. And the greater your purification, the greater the glory God has prepared for you in heaven. St. Paul expressed it with perfect clarity in his letter to the Romans. The sufferings of this present time are nothing compared to the glory that will be revealed in us. But Teresa went further. She didn't just repeat that truth, she experienced it. In her mystical ecstasies, God showed her the difference between souls who suffer little and souls who suffer much. And what she saw left her speechless. Teresa saw that in heaven there are different degrees of glory. Not that some are closer to God and others farther, because all the saved contemplate God face to face. But there are souls whose capacity for eternal joy is greater because they were enlarged by suffering on earth. Like a vessel molded in fire can contain more water than one that was never refined. Think of it this way. If you had two vessels, one small and one large, and filled them both to the brim with pure water, which contains more? The large one. Not because the water is different, but because its capacity is greater. So it is with souls. All who reach heaven receive the fullness of God. But some can contain more of that fullness because their capacity was enlarged by suffering. That's why God permits you to suffer. Not to distance you from Him, but to prepare you for greater intimacy. Not to punish you, but to reward you with a glory that comfortable souls will never know. You who've cried tears no one saw. You who've endured pains no one understands. You who've carried crosses that bent but didn't break you. You're being molded for an eternity of joy that surpasses anything you can imagine. And here's the deepest consolation. Suffering on earth is temporary. It can last years, even decades, but eternity has no end. Saint Teresa used to repeat a phrase that sustained her in her worst moments. All things pass. God alone suffices. The pains of this life will pass like a breath, but the glory God will give you in return will last forever and ever. Imagine being offered this deal. Endure 10 years of intense pain in exchange for 1 billion years of perfect happiness. Would you accept? Of course, because 10 years are nothing compared to 1 billion. But reality is even better, because eternity isn't 1 billion years, it's forever. And your suffering, however long it seems, is barely a blink compared to the infinite glory awaiting you. God is testing you because He trusts you. He's refining you because He considers you worthy of being turned into pure gold. He's preparing you for a reward so great that if you could see it right now, you would joyfully embrace every pain you've lived. But this second reason, as consoling as it is, isn't the only one. There's a third reason even deeper, and it has to do with something the Virgin Mary revealed to Saint Teresa in a vision that changed her life forever. There was one night in Saint Teresa's life that she described as the moment when everything changed. She had spent months in spiritual darkness, feeling her prayers weren't reaching heaven, that God had abandoned her. The physical pain of her illness was unbearable. But worse still was the pain of her soul, the feeling of being alone, of crying into the void, of receiving no answer. Until in the midst of that dark night, the Virgin Mary appeared to her. It wasn't a grandiose vision with lights and angels. It was something intimate, silent. Mary approached Teresa as a mother approaches her crying daughter in the darkness. And without saying a word at first, the Virgin showed her something Teresa would never forget. She showed her own heart. The Immaculate Heart of Mary pierced by a sword of sorrow. As Teresa understood, she understood the third reason why God permits suffering to good people. Your pain unites you mystically to Mary's heart at the foot of the cross. Each of your tears is a mother's tear. Each of your groans is a groan that Mary knows because she lived it first. Your suffering doesn't isolate you. It makes you a sister to the holiest woman who ever existed. Think about what Mary lived. She was completely innocent. She never committed a single sin. She was full of grace from her conception. If anyone deserved a life without suffering, it was her. And yet, God allowed her life to be marked by pain from the beginning. The elder Simeon prophesied it when she presented the child Jesus in the temple. A sword will pierce your soul. And that prophecy was fulfilled again and again. Mary suffered poverty when she gave birth in a stable. She suffered exile when she fled to Egypt to save her son from Herod. She suffered incomprehension when Jesus stayed in the temple, and she searched for him, anguished for 3 days. She suffered rejection when the Pharisees accused her son of blasphemy. She suffered betrayal when Judas sold him. She suffered injustice when they condemned him to death. She suffered torture when they flogged him and crowned him with thorns. And she suffered the cruelest agony a mother can live, watching her son die nailed to a cross. Why did God allow all that? Why didn't he protect Mary from suffering if she was his mother? For the same reason, he permits you to suffer. Because God needed a co-redemptrix. He needed a human soul to accompany Christ in his work of salvation. And he chose Mary not despite her holiness, but precisely because of it. Only a pure soul, only an immaculate heart could bear the weight of redemptive pain without breaking, without becoming bitter, without cursing. And here's the truth Mary revealed to Teresa that night. You've been chosen for the same purpose, not at the same level as Mary, of course, but in the same spirit. God chose you because he saw in you the capacity to suffer without losing faith, to cry without blaspheming, to be wounded without taking revenge, to carry your cross without throwing it down. And every time you accept your pain with love, you become a co-redemptrix alongside Mary. This means your suffering isn't useless. It's not a waste. It's not a cosmic mistake. It's an act of participation in Christ's saving work. Every time you offer your pain in union with Mary's heart, your suffering acquires redemptive value. It becomes powerful prayer, effective intercession, an instrument of salvation for souls you don't even know. Saint Teresa explained it with a beautiful image. She said souls who suffer are like candles lit in the darkness. The more they burn, the more light they give. And that light isn't just for themselves. It's light that illuminates the path of others walking lost in the night. Your pain accepted with faith becomes a beacon of hope for someone about to lose theirs. That's why when you suffer, you're not alone. Mary is with you. She knows every type of pain you can experience because she lived it first. When you cry over the loss of a loved one, Mary understands because she lost her son. When you feel God is distant, Mary understands because she also went through that darkness. When physical pain bends you, Mary understands because she stood at the foot of the cross, watching the one she loved most suffer without being able to do anything to prevent it. And she doesn't just understand you, she accompanies you. Every time you suffer, Mary's heart beats alongside yours. Every time you cry, her tears join yours. Every time you offer your pain, she presents that offering before God's throne like precious incense. You're not abandoned. You're in the company of the Queen of Heaven. You're united to the Mother of all who suffer. Teresa experienced this so real that she used to say, "When pain overcomes me, I close my eyes and place myself next to Mary at the foot of the cross. And there I find consolation that no human word can give. Because Mary doesn't tell me my pain is small. She tells me she understands it. She doesn't promise it will pass soon. She promises I won't carry it alone." And here comes something Mary whispered to Teresa that night. Something Teresa kept in her heart for years before daring to write it. Mary told her there's a fourth reason why God permits your suffering. A reason that has to do with something happening in purgatory right now. A reason that directly affects people you've loved who've already departed this world. And when you know that fourth reason, you'll understand why your pain today can change the eternal destiny of your loved ones. There's an episode in Saint Teresa's life the church rarely mentions. A dark episode, painful, almost shameful. But it's precisely that episode that reveals the deepest lesson about suffering. Because Teresa wasn't always the mystical saint we know. There was a time when she was on the verge of losing faith completely. A time when she cursed her vocation. A time when she shouted at God with rage and desperation. She was 24 years old when paralysis struck her. It wasn't passing pain. It was a devastating illness that left her completely immobilized. Imagine not being able to move your legs, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to care for yourself for the most basic needs, depending on others for everything, feeling your body is a prison from which there's no escape. Doctors tried everything, bloodletting, purges, remedies that burned her skin and destroyed her stomach. Nothing worked, on the contrary. Each treatment left her worse, until finally the doctors gave up. They told her case was incurable, that she would spend the rest of her life like this, paralyzed, useless, waiting for death. Teresa fell into a spiritual darkness she herself described as worse than physical pain. She began to wonder if God really existed, whether everything she had believed was a lie, whether she had wasted her life giving herself to a God who now abandoned her in her greatest need. And in that darkness, she did something she would never dare confess publicly for years. She shouted at God. She shouted with all the rage of her shattered soul. She accused him of injustice. She asked him why he had called her to religious life only to destroy her, why he had given her hope only to snatch it away, why he allowed her to suffer while other nuns who were lukewarm in their faith lived in perfect health. Teresa rebelled. She doubted. She was on the verge of giving up everything. And then something happened that changed everything. One night, in the midst of her deepest agony, when she had no strength left even to pray, she heard a voice. It wasn't an audible voice. It was something deeper. A voice that resonated in the most intimate part of her soul. And that voice told her something Teresa would never forget. This is how I treat my friends. And Teresa, even in her pain, responded with a spark of her old humor. That's why you have so few. But after that almost irreverent response, Teresa fell silent. And in that silence, she began to understand. God wasn't explaining why he permitted her suffering. He was revealing something deeper. He was showing her that suffering isn't a sign of divine abandonment. It's a sign of divine friendship. It's a sign that God trusts you enough to invite you to participate in his deepest mystery, the mystery of the cross. Teresa understood that God had permitted her paralysis because he had a plan for her that could only be fulfilled through that pain. And that plan included the fourth reason Mary had anticipated. Your suffering offered liberates souls from purgatory. Specifically, the souls of your loved ones who departed this world without having completely purged their sins. Listen carefully to this truth the Church teaches, but few truly understand. Purgatory isn't a place of eternal punishment. It's a place of temporary purification. The souls there are saved. They can no longer be lost, but they also cannot enter heaven until they've been completely purified of the last trace of sin. And that purification is painful. It's fire that burns all impurity. It's a process that can last years, decades, even centuries, depending on the gravity of the faults that must be cleansed. But there's something that can shorten that time, something that can relieve that suffering. The prayers and sacrifices of the living, especially suffering offered for the souls in purgatory. When you offer your pain with the specific intention of helping a deceased loved one, your suffering becomes ransom currency, vicarious payment, an instrument of liberation. Saint Teresa experienced this directly. She had visions of purgatory. She saw known souls suffering in that purifying fire. She saw her own father, a good and pious man, but who still needed purification. And God showed her something amazing. He showed her that every time she offered her pain for those souls, the fire of purgatory diminished. The time of purification shortened. The souls advanced faster toward heaven's glory. Imagine your mother died years ago. She was a good woman, devout. But like every human being, she had her faults. Small selfishness, hurtful words said in moments of weakness, grudges held, incomplete confessions, nothing grave, but imperfections that must be purified before being able to contemplate God's absolute holiness face to face. Your mother is in purgatory, not suffering unjust punishment, but being cleansed to enter heaven. Now imagine you on earth are going through intense pain, illness, loss, loneliness. And in the midst of that pain, you make a simple but powerful prayer. Lord, I offer this suffering for the rest of my mother's soul. Free her from purgatory. May my pain shorten her purification. In that instant, something happens in the spiritual world. Your offering reaches God's throne, and God, in His infinite mercy, applies the redemptive value of your suffering to your mother's soul. The time remaining of her purification decreases, the fire refining her lessons. And if your offering is sufficient, if your pain accepted with love has the necessary weight, your mother is freed. She leaves purgatory. She enters heaven. She sees God face to face. And from there, from eternal glory, she intercedes for you with a power no canonized saint could equal, because you were her liberator. You paid with your tears the price of her freedom. Teresa understood this when she was still paralyzed, and that understanding transformed her suffering. She was no longer a victim. She was a liberator. She no longer carried a meaningless cross. She carried the key that opened the gates of purgatory for the souls she loved. And that revelation was so powerful that Teresa stopped asking God to take away the pain. Instead, she began asking Him to give her the grace to offer it well. But this fourth reason, as consoling as it is, isn't the end. There's a fifth reason even deeper, and it has to do with souls who aren't in purgatory. Souls still alive, souls walking near you every day, souls only you can save. There are souls walking in this world that only you can save. It's not a metaphor. It's not pious exaggeration. It's a theological truth Saint Teresa discovered in her deepest revelations. God has assigned to your spiritual care specific souls, people with names and faces, people who perhaps live near you, people who will only convert, only be saved if you offer your suffering for them. This is what Saint Teresa called the fifth reason, and it's perhaps the most mysterious and most powerful of all. Your suffering offered obtains graces of conversion for souls on the edge of eternal perdition. Souls God could save in other ways, but whom in His plan of love, He decided to save through you, through your accepted pain, through your embraced cross. Think about this. Right now, there are people living in mortal sin. Your son who abandoned the faith, your sister living with her boyfriend, your neighbor who never steps in a church, your old friend who mocks God, people who, if they died today, would be condemned, not because God doesn't love them, not because God doesn't offer them graces, but because they've hardened their hearts and systematically reject every call to conversion. God could force their will. He could oblige them to repent. But that would violate the most sacred gift He gave them, freedom. God respects your freedom so much that He'd rather risk your rejection than violate your capacity to choose. But at the same time, God doesn't resign Himself to losing any of His sheep. So He does something extraordinary. He looks for someone willing to pay the price of their conversion. Someone who offers vicarious suffering to obtain the graces those souls need. And He chose you. Not randomly, not because you were the only one available. He chose you because He saw in you the capacity to love those people enough to suffer for them. Because He saw in you a heart capable of saying, "Lord, if I must suffer for my son to be saved, then I accept this pain. If my tears can buy my sister's conversion, then I cry with joy. If my illness can snatch my friend from the devil's claws, then I bless this illness." Saint Teresa lived this firsthand. There was a moment in her life when God showed her the soul of a man about to die in mortal sin. A man who had lived his entire life away from God. A man headed straight to hell. And God asked Teresa, "Would you be willing to suffer whatever is necessary to save him?" Teresa, without hesitating, answered yes. And in that instant, a new wave of physical pain attacked her. Pain so intense it left her breathless. But Teresa accepted it. She offered it. And days later, she received the news. That man had confessed moments before dying. He had been saved. That's what your suffering can accomplish. Not just for distant strangers, but for the people you love. Your son who drifted from the faith isn't lost. There's still hope. But that hope has a price. And that price is your pain, offered day after day, year after year if necessary, until grace breaks his resistance and his heart opens. Your sister living in sin isn't condemned. She can still convert. But she needs extraordinary graces, and those graces are obtained with prayer and sacrifice, your sacrifice. Here's the key Teresa discovered. The ordinary graces God offers all people often aren't enough for the most hardened hearts. Extraordinary graces are needed. Graces that touch the soul so deeply that even the most obstinate sinner feels the call to return. And those extraordinary graces are obtained through the vicarious suffering of victim souls. Souls who offer themselves as a living sacrifice for others' salvation. You don't have to be a canonized saint to be a victim soul. You don't have to have mystical visions or stigmata. You just have to accept your daily pain and offer it with clear intention. Lord, I accept this pain for my son's conversion. Lord, I offer this illness for my sister's salvation. Lord, I unite my tears with yours in the garden for my friend's soul. With that simple offering, you become a co-redemptrix, a collaborator with Christ in his work of salvation. And here comes the part Teresa considered most astonishing. When you offer your suffering for someone specific, God not only obtains graces for that person, He also shows you signs that your offering was accepted. Sometimes they're external signs. The person you're praying for suddenly seeks you out without knowing why, or has a disturbing dream, or hears a homily that reaches their heart. But other times, the sign is internal. You feel an inexplicable peace in the midst of pain, a certainty that your offering is working, a consolation no human word could give you. Teresa used to keep a mental list of souls for whom she offered her suffering. Each day, in the midst of her physical pains, she named those people before God. And she witnessed conversions that seemed impossible. Hardened sinners who suddenly changed their lives, heretics who returned to the Catholic faith, dying people who reconciled with God at the last moment. And Teresa knew it wasn't coincidence. It was the fruit of her offered pain. Now think about your own life. Is there someone you've prayed for during years without seeing results? Is there someone whose salvation deeply concerns you? Is there someone who seems so lost you've already lost hope? Don't give up, because perhaps the pain you're living right now is exactly the price God needs you to pay to obtain the grace of their conversion. Perhaps your suffering is the key that will open their heart. But you can't simply suffer passively. You have to offer actively. You have to tell God with clear words, I accept this pain for so-and-so. Use it as an instrument of salvation. Let not one tear be wasted. Let every groan be prayer. Let every sleepless night be interceding vigil. Let my cross become the anchor that prevents those souls from sinking into the abyss. And when you make that offering, something changes in the spiritual world. Angels mobilize, demons retreat, graces begin flowing toward the soul you're interceding for. And though you don't see immediate results, trust, because God never wastes suffering offered with love. He never ignores the tears of a victim's soul. He never leaves unrewarded the sacrifice of one who accepts their cross for love of others. This fifth reason is so powerful it could be enough to transform how you see suffering. But Teresa discovered there's a sixth reason even deeper, a reason that has to do with your eternal destiny, with the specific mission God has prepared for you, not just for this life, but for all eternity. There's something most people never consider when they think about heaven. They imagine a place of eternal rest, a paradise where they can finally stop suffering, stop struggling, stop working, a state of absolute peace where there will be no more tears or pain. And all that is true, but it's only part of the truth, because heaven isn't only rest, it's also mission, eternal service, ceaseless activity in God's love. Saint Teresa discovered this in one of her most extraordinary revelations. And it's the sixth reason why God permits your suffering. God is preparing you now, through your pain, for a specific mission you'll fulfill in heaven for all eternity. Your present cross determines your future heavenly responsibility. Your faithfulness in earthly suffering decides the level of service that will be entrusted to you in eternal glory. Listen to what Jesus said in the Gospel. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with little. I'll put you in charge of much. Enter into your master's joy." Most interpret this parable as teaching about different rewards in heaven. And it's true. But Teresa saw deeper. She understood those rewards aren't passive. They're not like medals hung on the wall to contemplate. They're active responsibilities, concrete missions, eternal tasks that vary according to the capacity each soul developed on earth. And that capacity is developed mainly through suffering, because pain is the school where God trains his closest collaborators, where he refines those who will be his most powerful instruments, not just in this life, but in eternity. Think of it this way. A general doesn't trust the most important missions to inexperienced soldiers. He trusts those who've been proven in battle, those who've demonstrated courage under fire, those who didn't flee when the situation got difficult. This is how God works with you. He subjects you to tests, not to destroy you, but to strengthen you, not to see if you're worthy, because he already knows your heart, but to prepare you, to develop in you the virtues you'll need for the eternal mission he has planned for you. And those virtues can only be forged on the anvil of suffering. Teresa had a vision of heaven rarely mentioned. She saw that glorified souls aren't all doing the same thing. They're not all simply contemplating God in passive ecstasy. They're working, serving, fulfilling specific missions assigned by God according to their capacities. And the souls who suffered most on earth are those who receive the most important missions in heaven. She saw souls who had been intensely tested in life, converted into perpetual intercessors. Their eternal mission is to present the petitions of the living before God's throne. Day and night, without ceasing, without ever tiring, they intercede for those still fighting the battle on earth. And their intercession is so powerful, so effective, that God rarely denies what they ask, because they earned that privilege through suffering accepted with love. She saw other souls whose mission is to guide guardian angels. Yes, you read that right. There are saints in heaven whose task is to coordinate and direct the work of angels protecting human beings. They plan spiritual strategies, organize defenses against demonic attacks, mobilize heavenly armies to protect people in danger, and these souls were chosen for that responsibility because they demonstrated in life an unshakable faithfulness, even when it seemed God had abandoned them. She also saw souls whose mission is to accompany the dying in their last moments, to be invisibly present alongside those about to cross the threshold of eternity, to whisper words of consolation, to strengthen them against the devil's final temptations, to help them persevere until their last breath. And these souls received that responsibility because they themselves went through terrible agonies and know exactly what it feels like to be on the edge of despair. Do you begin to understand? Your current suffering isn't useless. It's training. It's preparation. It's the process by which God is equipping you for an eternal mission only you can fulfill. Every pain you endure develops a specific virtue in you. Every tear you shed gives you spiritual authority. Every dark night you cross teaches you to guide others who will go through similar darkness. Teresa expressed it with a phrase that should be engraved in the heart of every person who suffers. God wastes no pain. Every suffering has a purpose, not just for this life, but for eternity. If you patiently endure a long illness, you're being trained to console the sick for all eternity. If you go through losing a loved one without losing faith, you're being prepared to accompany others in their eternal grief. If you live in loneliness without becoming bitter, you're being formed to spiritually visit the lonely of all generations. Think about Saint Teresa herself. She spent years paralyzed, years when she couldn't serve God in the ways she desired, years when she felt useless. But it was precisely that paralysis that prepared her for her eternal mission, because Teresa now from heaven intercedes with unmatched power for all the chronically ill, for all who suffer misunderstood physical pains, for all who feel useless because of their limitations. She understands them. She lived what they lived, and that's why her intercession is so effective. The same will happen with you. The specific pain you're living now is preparing you for a specific mission in heaven. If you're living widowhood, you'll be an eternal intercessor for widows. If you're dealing with children who've drifted from the faith, you'll be a heavenly defender of mothers with the same pain. If you're facing injustices, you'll be a protector of the unjustly treated. Your experience will become your specialty. Your cross will become your authority. And here's the most astonishing part. The greater your faithfulness in present suffering, the greater your authority in the eternal mission. If you endure much, much will be entrusted to you. If you're faithful in small pain, you'll be given greater responsibilities. If you persevere to the end without giving up, without cursing, without becoming bitter, you'll enter your Lord's joy with a capacity for service that will surpass thousands of souls who lived comfortable lives. This means every decision you make now, in the midst of pain, has eternal consequences. Every time you accept your cross instead of rebelling against it, you increase your future capacity. Every time you offer your suffering instead of wasting it in complaints, you qualify for greater heavenly responsibilities. Every time you choose to trust God despite not understanding, you demonstrate you're worthy of participating in the deepest mysteries of His eternal government. That's why God doesn't remove your pain, not because He's cruel, but because He loves you too much to deprive you of the preparation you need for your glorious destiny. You're like a diamond being cut. The process is painful, but every cut, every polish, every facet created through suffering increases your capacity to reflect God's light for all eternity. But this sixth reason, as glorious as it is, still isn't the most important. There's a seventh reason, the final reason, the deepest, the most mysterious. The one Saint Teresa kept for her closest spiritual daughters. The one that explains why God specifically chooses good people for suffering and not sinners. And that seventh reason is what will forever transform how you understand who you are and why God entrusted you with this cross. There was a secret Saint Teresa kept for decades, a secret she only revealed in private letters to her closest spiritual daughters. A secret she never included in her published books because she feared it would be misinterpreted, that it would cause scandal, that they'd accuse her of heresy or spiritual pride. But it was a truth so powerful, so transforming, that she couldn't take it to the grave without sharing it with those who had ears to hear. That truth is what leads to the seventh reason, the supreme reason, the one that answers the question tormenting every faithful soul who suffers. Why does God permit good people to suffer and not sinners? Why does the heaviest cross fall on the most faithful shoulders? Why does the most intense pain touch those who love Him most? Teresa took years to understand the answer. Years of paralysis, years of spiritual darkness, years of feeling abandoned by God. And when the answer finally came, it came in a way she would never have imagined. It came through a vision so impactful that Teresa trembled every time she remembered it, a vision where Christ Himself spoke to her face to face. He showed her two paths. On one walked multitudes of people, comfortable people, people who prayed the minimum, who fulfilled the basics, who never experienced true suffering, people who would die in God's grace and be saved, yes, but who never knew deep intimacy with Him, never entered the most intimate mansions of the interior castle, were never invited to participate in the most sacred mysteries of His love. On the other path, very narrow, very steep, walked few people, and all carried crosses, heavy crosses, crosses that made them cry, crosses that made them doubt, but crosses that led directly to God's heart. And Christ told Teresa something she would never forget. These are my intimate friends. These are the souls I fully trust. These are the chosen ones to truly know me. Teresa understood in that moment the deepest truth about suffering, a truth few Christians know, a truth that changes everything. God doesn't permit suffering despite your goodness. He permits suffering precisely because of your goodness, because only strong souls can bear the weight of pain without breaking, without blaspheming, without cursing, without losing faith. Think about this. If God permitted a hardened sinner to experience the level of suffering you're living, what would happen? That sinner would sink into despair, would curse God, would become bitter, would lose all hope, and probably would be damned, because their soul, weakened by years of sin, doesn't have the necessary strength to sustain the weight of an intense cross. But you're different. God knows you. He knows your spiritual strength, though you don't see it. He knows the depth of your faith, though you doubt. He knows your capacity for love, though you feel empty. And He trusts you. He trusts you can bear this cross without breaking. He trusts you can suffer without blaspheming. He trusts you can cry without cursing. That's why He chose you, not as punishment, but as honor, not as abandonment, but as trust, not as rejection, but as intimacy. God gave you this cross because He knows you, and only you can carry it the way He needs, with faith, with hope, with love. Teresa wrote in one of her private letters something she never dared publish. God doesn't entrust His heaviest crosses to lukewarm souls. He entrusts them to His most intimate friends, because only they have the strength of love necessary to convert suffering into offering. Only they can transform pain into worship. This is the truth Teresa hid, the truth you now know. Your suffering isn't an accident, it's divine choice, a choice that honors you, that distinguishes you, that marks you as a soul God fully trusts. And now that you know this truth, only the seventh and final reason remains to be revealed. The reason that explains why specifically you were chosen. The time has come to reveal what Saint Teresa considered the most sacred truth about suffering. The truth she guarded jealously. The truth she only shared with those souls she knew could receive it without being scandalized. The truth that forever changes how you understand who you are and why God entrusted you with this cross. The seventh reason, the supreme reason, the final revelation, is this. God permits good people to suffer because only they can endure pain without cursing it, without losing faith, without becoming bitter. Sinners would sink into despair or blasphemy. But you were chosen because God trusts your spiritual strength. Your cross isn't punishment, it's honor. It's a sign that God considers you capable of carrying with dignity the weight that would destroy others. Stop for a moment. Let it penetrate the deepest part of your soul, because this changes absolutely everything. You're not being punished, you're being honored. You weren't abandoned, you were chosen. You're not a victim. You're a spiritual champion in whom God placed His absolute trust. Saint Teresa understood it when Christ showed her something that left her speechless. In a vision, she saw two souls. One was a hardened sinner living in constant rebellion against God. The other was a devout woman who had spent years in intense suffering. And Christ asked her, "What would happen if I permitted the sinner to experience the suffering this woman has endured?" Teresa saw the answer clearly. The sinner would curse God, would renounce all faith, would sink into hatred and despair, would probably take their own life. Because their soul, weakened by years of sin, doesn't have the necessary strength to sustain the weight of a true cross. But the devout woman, though she cried, though she doubted, though she felt she couldn't go on, never cursed God, never renounced her faith, never stopped praying though she felt her prayers didn't reach heaven. Why? Because her soul had been strengthened by years of faithfulness. Her love for God was so deep that not even the most intense pain could tear it out. And Christ told Teresa something she would never forget. That's why I trust heavy crosses only to strong souls. That's why I permit intense suffering only to those I know won't abandon me. That's why I choose for the deepest pain those I love most intimately. Because only they can convert suffering into worship. Only they can transform the cross into a crown. This means something revolutionary for you. Your cross isn't evidence God has forgotten you. It's evidence God trusts you more than He trusts thousands of people living comfortable lives. You're not the abandoned one. You're the chosen one. You're not the punished one. You're the one honored with a divine trust few receive. Think of it this way. A coach doesn't trust the most difficult missions to weak athletes. He trusts them to champions, to those who've demonstrated strength, to those he knows won't give up when the situation gets difficult. God doesn't trust the heaviest crosses to weak souls. He trusts them to His spiritual champions, to those He knows deeply, to those He knows will remain faithful even in the hardest test. Every day you endure your cross without giving up on God, you're fighting a spiritual battle of cosmic proportions. Every day you get up and say, even with a broken voice, "I trust you, Lord." You inflict a defeat on hell and cause jubilation in heaven. Your cross is your honor. Your pain is your dignity. Your suffering is proof that God considers you worthy of participating in the deepest mystery of His love, the mystery of the redemptive cross. You're not a victim. You're Christ's collaborator in the world's salvation. You're not abandoned. You're chosen for a mission only you can fulfill. Knowing the truth isn't enough. You can intellectually understand the 7 reasons why God permits your suffering. You can agree with every word you've heard. But if that knowledge doesn't transform into daily practice, it will remain beautiful theory that doesn't change your life. That's why Teresa didn't just teach truths. She also taught concrete methods to live them. I'll give you 7 practical steps, one for each reason, that you can start applying from tomorrow. Steps that will transform how you live pain, that will convert your suffering from unbearable burden to powerful offering. First step, the morning offering of purification. Each morning before getting out of bed, say this prayer: Lord, I offer you all the pains of this day for the purification of my soul. Burn in me all attachment to earthly things. Refine me like gold in fire. With those words, you're aligning your will with the first reason. You're no longer a passive victim. You're an active collaborator in your own sanctification. Second step, keep a record of your daily crosses. At the end of each day, briefly write the difficulties you experienced. Physical pain, hurtful words, worry, loneliness, and next to each one right, offered to increase my eternal reward. Suffering not offered is suffering wasted, but suffering offered becomes heavenly treasure. Third step, unite yourself to Mary's heart. Every time you feel intense pain, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're next to Mary at the foot of the cross and tell her, "Mother, I unite my pain with yours. Accompany my cross as you accompanied Jesus." When you offer your pain in union with Mary, it acquires a redemptive power that isolated pain doesn't have. Fourth step, name the soul you're offering for. It's not enough to say, "I offer my pain for the souls in purgatory." Teresa taught being specific. Choose a name, your deceased father, your grandmother, your friend who died, and each day say, "Lord, may my pain today shorten the purgation time of so-and-so. Free them from purgatory." Fifth step, ask for grace of conversion for someone living. Make a list of people whose salvation concerns you. Your son who drifted from the faith, your sister living with her boyfriend. Choose one or two names, and each week offer your suffering specifically for their conversion, saying, "Lord, I accept this pain for so-and-so's conversion. Touch their heart. May they return to you before they die." Sixth step, visualize your heavenly mission. Close your eyes. Imagine you're already in heaven. Imagine God assigns you an eternal mission related to the suffering you're living now. If you suffer illness, imagine yourself consoling the sick for all eternity and say, "Lord, prepare me now for the mission you'll give me in heaven. Don't waste a single suffering." Seventh step, renew your offering before sleeping. Before closing your eyes each night, mentally review the day, physical pains, humiliations, tears, and offer everything saying, "Lord, I offer you everything I suffered today." May nothing have been wasted, and finish with this phrase Teresa repeated, "All things pass. God alone suffices." If you apply these 7 steps for a month, your life will change. Not because the pain disappears, but because its meaning will be completely transformed. You'll no longer suffer as a desperate victim. You'll suffer as a conscious warrior, as Christ's collaborator, as God's chosen one. Saint Teresa lived these steps for decades. And at the end of her life, she could say, "I die a daughter of the Church." She didn't regret having suffered. She rejoiced because she understood every pain had a purpose. And you'll say the same when your hour comes. Now you know the 7 reasons. You know why God permits your suffering. You know you're not abandoned but chosen, that you're not punished but honored, that your cross has a purpose beyond what you can imagine. But one final question remains. What promise does Saint Teresa make you if you live your pain in light of these 7 reasons? Teresa left written something few know, a solemn promise for all souls who understand the mystery of suffering and live it consciously. She promised that whoever accepts their cross with love, whoever offers their pain day after day without giving up, whoever remains faithful even in the deepest darkness, will receive 3 consolations before dying. The first consolation is supernatural peace, a peace the world cannot give or take away, a peace that remains even when pain continues, a peace that makes you capable of saying truthfully, "I'm suffering, but I'm not desperate. I'm crying, but I'm not destroyed. I'm carrying my cross, but I'm not alone." The second consolation is certainty of salvation, not proud presumption, but humble confidence that God, who tested you in this life, won't abandon you in your hour of death, that the one who gave you the cross will also give you the crown, that the one who trusted you to suffer will also trust you to reign with him eternally. The third consolation is seeing fruit of your offering. It can be in this life or on your deathbed. But Teresa promised God will show you at least one conversion, one liberation from purgatory, one grace obtained by your offered pain, so you know with certainty your suffering wasn't in vain, that every tear was worth it. that your cross saved souls. These 3 consolations are yours if you remain faithful. If you apply the 7 steps you learned, if you live each day in light of the 7 reasons, if you transform your pain from curse to blessing. Teresa promised it, and Teresa keeps her promises because she speaks from heaven where there's no longer any lie. Now I invite you to do 2 things. First, if you understood these 7 reasons and wish to live your suffering consciously, write in the comments, "I accept my cross." Those 3 words are your commitment before God and before this community of souls who also carry their crosses with faith. Second, subscribe to this channel to continue receiving Saint Teresa's teachings that will transform your spiritual life. And I especially invite you to watch the next video where I'll reveal something few know and that Saint Teresa urgently warned. What happens to the soul when the body is cremated? It's a truth that could change eternal decisions for you and your family. That video is titled, "The Soul Suffers After Cremation." Don't miss it. May Saint Teresa intercede for you. May the Virgin Mary accompany you in your cross. And may God grant you the grace to understand you were chosen for something great, something eternal, something only you can fulfill.